In my past life, I was in love with Johnny for 7 years. I watched the endless parade of women in his life and never crossed the line. A year after he died, I was sent back 20 years and brought the 15-year-old Johnny home with me. I suppressed my overwhelming love for him and planned out the perfect life for him. A top university, a great career, and a partner who was his equal. Until he kissed me hard on the corner of my mouth. "Vincent, you told me to love someone else, but you never taught me how to stop loving you. You're such a liar. You stole my heart and now you're trying to walk away. You can't be that cruel." The sharp pain in my wrist and the cold feeling of life draining away didn't last long. When I opened my eyes again, the darkness I expected wasn't there. Instead, I was in a dim, old alley. My ears were filled with vile curses and the dull thud of fists hitting flesh. "You little orphan bastard. Got a tough mouth on you. We're gonna teach you a lesson today." I instinctively pushed myself up and looked toward the sound. A few low-life thugs were surrounding a boy curled up in a corner. He was so thin, his spine jutting out under his ragged shirt. His lip was split and bleeding, but his eyes, black as ink, were frighteningly bright. They burned with an untamed fire, like a cornered wolf cub refusing to back down. My breath caught in my throat. Blood rushed to my head. My ears started ringing, and the world around me blurred and distorted. The only thing in focus was that boy, so clear it hurt my eyes. Johnny. It was my Johnny as a teenager. For no reason at all, I knew it was him. The coldness of his body as he died in my arms in my past life still felt seared into my skin. The next moment, I was seeing him alive at 15, in pain and fighting. Something twisted deep inside my heart. Without thinking, I grabbed a steel pipe leaning against the wall, walked over, and waved it at the loudmouth thugs. My voice was low and cold. "Get lost." My sudden appearance and cold glare startled them, and they scattered, muttering curses. The alley fell silent. Johnny remained in a defensive posture, staring at me. I already knew what had happened. My 25-year-old self had traveled back 20 years and met the 15-year-old Johnny. I remembered how, after Johnny died in my past life, I had knelt up thousands of steps to pray for a supposedly powerful charm, wishing we could meet again in the next life. Now I knew that charm had really worked. I looked at Johnny, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I crouched down, met his eyes, and tried to keep my voice steady, though my fingertips were still trembling. "Do you want to come home with me?" I took the 15-year-old Johnny back to my apartment. The place wasn't big, but it was clean and tidy, a world away from the rundown neighborhood outside. He was silent the whole way, following half a step behind me like a hyper-alert young animal, observing everything, including me. I closed the door, shutting out the world. Under the warm yellow light, I could see his injuries more clearly. They were even more shocking than my first glimpse in the alley. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice even. "The first aid kit is under the TV stand. I'll run a bath. You should take a shower and clean up your cuts." He didn't move. His starkly black and white eyes just looked at me. After a few seconds, he finally said in a low voice, "Thanks." His tone was flat, tinged with a clear wariness and distance. I nodded and turned to go to the bathroom, nearly tripping over my own feet. The hum of the water heater was loud in the quiet room. I leaned against the cool tile wall in the bathroom, listening to the faint sounds from outside. He'd found the first aid kit, opened the lid. A powerful sense of unreality washed over me. I was really back 20 years in the past. Johnny was alive and real just on the other side of this door. I pinched the skin between my thumb and forefinger hard. The sharp pain confirmed this wasn't a dream. The phone that had traveled back with me was in the inner pocket of my suit jacket, a heavy weight like an anxious heart. I subconsciously pressed my hand against it, but the cold metal felt scorching hot. Inside it were all the remains of my previous world. The phone had no SIM card, only the photos in the gallery, most of them not even high resolution. They were all pictures I had secretly taken of Johnny. There was a shot of his profile as he worked in his study, a silhouette of him smoking on the balcony during a rare moment of relaxation, and a picture of his helpless but indulgent smile when he was forced to sing at a company party. And then there was the last one, a blurry photo of the two of us against the backdrop of the spectacular fireworks at St. Victor's Harbor. In the picture, I was looking at him and he was looking at the camera, a faint but genuine smile on his lips. It was the last image he left me, a tombstone carved into my soul. The soft click of the first aid kit closing snapped me back to reality. I took a few deep breaths, forcing down the stinging in my eyes, and walked out as naturally as I could. He had already cleaned up the cuts on his face and was awkwardly trying to apply medicine to a scrape on his elbow. "Let me," I said, walking over and taking the cotton swab and iodine from his hand. His body tensed for a second, but he didn't refuse, obediently holding out his arm. Under the light, he looked down, his eyelashes casting a small shadow on his cheeks. He had a strong nose and his lips were pressed into a thin line. The promise of his handsome features was already there. I carefully wiped away the dirt and dried blood around the wound with an iodine-soaked swab, my movements as gentle as possible. It was so quiet in the room that I could hear both of our breaths. I could smell the faint scent of sweat and blood on him, mixed with the clean scent unique to a teenage boy. For some reason, it made my eyes burn. In my past life, when he took me in, did he feel the same way? Awkwardly wanting to be good to someone. The cotton swab touched a deeper cut, and he sucked in a barely audible breath. "Does it hurt?" I stopped immediately. He glanced up at me quickly, then looked down again. "No," just as stubborn as he was in my past life. I silently continued what I was doing, but my heart felt like it was soaking in warm salt water, soft and aching. After I had treated all his wounds, the bath was ready. I found a clean towel and a set of pajamas I'd never worn. They might be a little big, but they'll have to do for now. Just toss your other clothes in the washing machine. He took the clothes, mumbled another thank you, and quickly disappeared into the bathroom. The sound of running water filled the apartment. I collapsed onto the sofa behind me as if all my strength had been drained, staring blankly at the glowing light bulb on the ceiling. The phone in my pocket felt hot, silently searing my chest. I knew I shouldn't dwell on the past. This Johnny was new, a blank slate. He shouldn't have to bear the heavy weight of love and hate from another timeline. But it was Johnny, the man I had stood by for 10 years, loved for 7, the man who was etched into my very bones. How could I possibly treat him as a brand new, complete stranger? The water stopped. A moment later, the door opened. He walked out wearing my oversized pajamas, the sleeves rolled up several times to reveal his thin wrists. His hair was dripping wet. With the blood and grime washed away, his face was clean and handsome, with a boyish charm. He looked a little uncomfortable under my gaze and turned his head away, the tips of his ears turning slightly red. I quickly looked away and stood up. The hairdryer's in the drawer. "Are you hungry? I'll make some noodles." I practically fled into the kitchen. There wasn't much in the fridge. I took out eggs and some pasta, boiled water, and cracked the eggs, my movements mechanical, until the steam blurred my vision. That night, I was almost afraid to sleep, terrified this was all just a dream. But as I drifted off, I saw Johnny in my dreams. In my last life after he died, I rarely dreamed of him. He was so stingy with his appearances that it used to make me angry and sad. Then, one day, I remembered I had once told him I was afraid of ghosts. After that, he really did stop visiting me. The scenes in my dream played out like an old movie projector, showing me my past with Johnny, one frame at a time. The first time Johnny saw me, I was 15. My father had died in a car crash, and my stepmother took over, seizing all the assets before throwing me out of the house. A light snow was falling, and I was huddled under the awning of a dessert shop, but flakes still landed on me. That's when Johnny appeared. He held an umbrella over my head and handed me a small cake. Then he crouched down to my level, looked me in the eyes, and asked if I wanted to come home with him. I thought he might be a con man, but I figured going with him might buy me some time. If I didn't, my fate was either to be beaten to death by my stepmother or freeze to death in a snowstorm. So I went home with him. But Johnny wasn't a con man. He was the kindest person in the world to me, bar none. Johnny gave me the very best of everything he could. I found out later that at the time, Johnny had just started a company with a friend, only to be betrayed. The business, which was just starting to take off, was ruined. It was the lowest point of his life. And that's when he found me and took me home. Two broken, lonely people, huddled together for warmth, created a small, loving home. I think I realized early on that my feelings for Johnny were different. I couldn't help but love him. He had dropped out of the sky like a hero, saved me from the abyss, then crashed straight into my heart, taking over every single part of my life. I honestly couldn't see anyone but him, so I started loving him when I was 18, and I didn't stop until I was 25. 7 whole years. I went from being his little brother to his most brilliant business partner. I never thought about confessing. Johnny took me in when he was 25, and I always saw him with a string of girlfriends, none lasting more than 3 months. But he never brought them home because that was our home, belonging only to him and me. I was too scared to ruin what we had, terrified that if I ever spoke the love hidden in my heart, I would be met with a cold expression. So, I was a coward, hiding my feelings for 7 years. The scenes flashed by, one after another, finally landing at St. Victor's Harbor. They have a fireworks show on New Year's Eve at the harbor, supposedly the most beautiful in the entire city. I had booked a table at a restaurant with the best view, wanting to spend the holiday with Johnny. But the first sound we heard wasn't fireworks. It was a gunshot. Johnny was lying in my arms, blood pouring from his chest. The world around us was chaos, and a sharp ringing filled my ears. I couldn't hear anything. I mechanically called for an ambulance. Johnny tried to smile, his hand reaching for my face. I could only make out his words by reading his lips. He told me to live. Johnny died. They couldn't save him. He stopped breathing right there in my arms. Later, I found out it was a business rival. They were powerful and well-connected. This was their usual way of doing things. I went mad trying to find a way to get back at them. In the end, I launched a scorched earth campaign that destroyed my own company but sent every last one of them to prison or to hell. After Johnny died, I developed a severe mental illness. Once I had dealt with his killers, I had no desire to keep struggling in this world. I chose to end my life. I was sorry, Johnny. You told me to live. The dream shifted again. The image of my bleeding wrist blurred into a vast, white nothingness. In the void, I saw Johnny. It was his 25-year-old self holding my 15-year-old hand, about to take me home. The scene changed. The taller man was me now, and the teenager was Johnny. I was holding his hand, my 25-year-old self, about to take him home. His wounds healed quickly. A teenager's body has an amazing ability to recover. But the silence and wariness in his character were much slower to fade. I knew his parents had died young and that he'd been kicked around between a few horrible relatives like a soccer ball, suffering constant scorn and abuse, until he finally ran away to fend for himself. In my past life, he had casually mentioned that his childhood wasn't great. I never realized how concretely and cruelly not great it had been. I got him transferred to the best high school in the city. It took a bit of effort to sort out the paperwork, but money could open a lot of doors back then. He had a strong academic foundation and was incredibly smart. He quickly caught up at his new school and even became one of the top students. Looking at him was like watching a diamond in the rough being polished clean, slowly revealing its brilliant, gentle light. It gave me an almost pathological sense of satisfaction. I was almost obsessive about giving him the best of everything. A spacious, bright study, the latest desktop computer, shelves filled with reference books and classic literature. Even a pair of basketball shoes he glanced at for a second too long. I'd quietly buy them and leave them by his door. He never asked for anything, but every time he received something, his usually solemn eyes would light up for a moment. He'd purse his lips, look at me seriously, and say, "Thanks, bro." He started calling me bro. I'd answer, but my heart felt like it was being pricked by 1,000 tiny needles. In my past life, after he took me in, I called him the same thing. Johnny, bro. It was a name filled with dependence and admiration, and later, tainted with so much unspoken love that my final, choked out whisper of it, lost in the sound of a gunshot, tasted of blood and despair. Now it was his turn to call me bro. fate felt like a cruel and absurd circle. I stood at the kitchen doorway, watching him at the dining table, engrossed in his homework. The warm yellow light traced the focused line of his profile, his strong nose, the faint shadow his eyelashes cast on his cheeks. He was 16 now and had shot up in height. He was no longer the malnourished, skinny boy who had first arrived. His shoulders were broadening, starting to take on the shape of a young man. He looked so much like him. The resemblance to the 25-year-old Johnny from my memories grew stronger every day. My heart felt as if it had been suddenly squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain making my fingertips go numb. I watched him greedily, my eyes tracing the curve of his eyebrows, the shape of his eyes. He must have sensed it because he suddenly looked up. I didn't have time to look away, and my gaze crashed right into his questioning eyes. In them, I could clearly see my own look, yearning, pained, as if I were looking through him to see another person's soul. I jerked my head away and hurriedly turned, pretending to pour a glass of water. The sound of the running faucet covered my racing heart and ragged breathing. "Bro," he said from behind me, his voice having lost its initial hoarseness and now clear and bright. "What were you looking at?" The water in the glass overflowed, scalding the back of my hand. I turned off the faucet, my back still to him, and tried to keep my voice steady. "Nothing. Just noticed how focused you were on your studies." Silence fell behind me. I knew he didn't believe me. This kind of scene had happened far too many times over the past year. I would find myself staring at him, lost in thought, and every time he looked back, I'd retreat in shame. I was afraid he would see the thick, heavy emotion in my eyes. It wasn't the way a brother should look at his younger brother. Even more, I was terrified he would discover that I was using him to love a soul that was long gone. That would be so incredibly unfair to him. That old phone became my only emotional outlet and an unhealing wound. I hid it in an old metal box, shoved into the deepest corner under my bed, like I was hiding a skeleton that couldn't see the light of day. Only late at night, after making sure Johnny was sound asleep, would I dare to take it out. I'd run my fingers over the cold screen again and again, opening the locked photo album. The pictures swiped by one. Each one was like a dull knife, slicing at my heart over and over. Longing and guilt gnawed at me day and night. I knew I shouldn't be like this, but what could I do? How could I possibly forget? One night I came home drunk. My head was splitting, and I collapsed onto the sofa in a haze. Johnny silently brought over a hot, damp towel and started to wipe my face. His touch was light, his fingertips occasionally brushing against my skin, carrying the warmth of youth and an almost imperceptible tremor. I opened my eyes. In the dim light, he was pressing his lips together, his gaze fixed on my forehead as he carefully wiped it. In that moment, the line between my past and present lives completely blurred. I suddenly grabbed his wrist, my grip so tight I could have crushed it. "Johnny," I heard my own voice, hoarse and ragged, thick with alcohol and a much deeper despair. "Don't go." His body went rigid. He tried to pull his wrist free from my grasp, but couldn't. I looked at him through my drunken haze, at this face I had thought about day and night. 2 lifetimes of pent-up love and pain finally broke through. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I rambled, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. I was treating him like the Johnny from my past life, confessing to him, begging him, pouring out all the fear and pain I had never dared to speak. He seemed stunned by my breakdown, frozen in place, letting me clutch his hand, letting my tears soak his sleeve. After a long time, he finally asked, very slowly, in a strained voice I had never heard before, "Bro, who am I?" My vision was blurred with tears. All I could see was his face, so similar to the one in my memory. "Johnny," I murmured, as if clinging to a last thread of hope. "You're Johnny." He was silent for a long time. Then, bit by bit, he firmly and deliberately pulled his wrist from my hand. The towel fell to the floor. He didn't say anything. He just stood up, quietly covered me with a blanket, turned off the living room light, and went back to his small room. The door clicked softly shut. I lay there in the darkness, My drunken outburst had sobered me up considerably, leaving only a cold dread and regret that washed over my entire body. What did I say? What did I do? Did he figure something out? After that night, Johnny didn't seem to change much. He still called me bro, still went to school on time, and still drank the milk I bought for him. But the delicate balance we had carefully maintained seemed to have been shattered. When he looked at me, there was something deeper and more complex in his eyes. It was no longer simple dependence and gratitude. It was mixed with curiosity, confusion, and a hint of suppressed emotion I couldn't decipher. He stopped letting me touch him easily. Sometimes when I handed him something, if our fingertips accidentally brushed, he would pull his hand back as if he'd been zapped. He spent more and more time in his study. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the light seeping from under his door. He was avoiding me. The realization made my heart sink, yet it also brought a strange sense of relief. This was for the best. Let it be. Vincent, you got a second chance at life to make sure he would be safe and happy, to have a bright and brilliant future. Your filthy, inappropriate feelings, the ones that belong to another world, should rot inside you, never to see the light of day. He deserved better, someone normal, a life without shadows and heavy baggage, not to be tied to a monster who was in love with a dead man, barely surviving on memories. I started trying harder to play the role of a brother. I asked about his schoolwork, helped him plan for the future, and even, intentionally or not, I'd bring up that a certain girl in his class was really smart, or that the girl from the class next door who was always asking him questions seemed nice. Every time I brought it up, he would look up, his dark eyes fixed on me, staring until I felt so guilty I couldn't continue. I'm still young, bro, he would reply coolly, then lower his head and go back to his work, leaving me with the cold, closed-off top of his head. The atmosphere would turn to ice, again and again. It felt like we were locked in a silent, exhausting tug of war. Time flew by in this suffocating distance. Johnny got into a top university with outstanding grades, choosing to major in finance. I stood at the bustling university entrance on registration day, watching his tall, straight back as he handled his paperwork and greeted his roommates. A complex mix of pride and sorrow washed over me. He was grown up. He was no longer the thorny boy who needed me to protect him. He would fly higher and farther, see things I'd never seen. And the pathetic, twisted connection between us had finally reached the point where it needed to be severed completely. At university, Johnny almost instantly became the center of attention. He was tall, handsome, and an excellent student. Even in a simple white shirt and jeans, he stood out in a crowd. I knew a lot of people would fall for him, but seeing him surrounded by admirers, seeing people confess their feelings to him, was another thing entirely. One time, I went to his dorm to drop off some clothes for the new season. I happened to see a girl in a pretty dress, her cheeks flushed, stopping him outside the building. She was holding a beautifully wrapped gift and her voice was soft and sweet. "Johnny, this is for you." He just stood there, his expression politely distant. He didn't take it. "Thank you, but no." He paused, as if he wanted to say something more. Then his gaze lifted and met mine from across the way. His expression changed in an instant. The polite distance vanished, replaced by something deeper that flashed across his eyes. He walked straight over to me. "Bro, what are you doing here?" he asked, naturally taking the bag from my hands, his fingers brushing against the back of mine. I flinched back as if I'd been burned. He froze, his eyes darkening. I forced myself to ignore the sharp sting in my heart and managed to smile. "Just dropping off some clothes. That girl just now. I don't know her," he cut me off, his tone a little harsh.
Bro, I'm hungry.
"Let's go get something to eat." He grabbed my wrist and pulled me along, his grip leaving no room for argument. I looked at his tense profile and swallowed the rest of my words. The school held a talent show. I was dragged along to watch him perform. He played the piano. The spotlight shone on him as he sat at the grand piano in a well-fitted black suit. His long fingers glided across the keys, the melody beautiful and full of emotion. The audience was quiet, countless eyes fixed on him, filled with admiration and infatuation. One of those gazes came from a boy in a matching suit sitting beside him, his eyes burning with an intensity that could have melted him. During a pause in the music, Johnny turned his head and gave the boy a faint smile. It was just a small smile, but it made the boy blush instantly. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an icy hand, my blood freezing in my veins. I realized with stark clarity that I was just a brief, strange protector from a dark chapter of his youth. Once his wings were strong enough, he would fly away without a second thought. I sat in the noisy auditorium, feeling a chill run through me. No, I couldn't let this go on. I watched him take a bow to thunderous applause, watched that handsome boy hand him a bottle of water with a red face, watched them stand together, looking as perfect as a painting. An idea began to grow in my mind, circling and taking root. Leave, set him free, and give yourself a chance to survive. I started preparing to move abroad. The process was surprisingly fast. Under the pretext of expanding our overseas market, I arranged for a reliable person at my company to take over my work. I didn't tell Johnny. He lived in the dorms at college and didn't come home often anyway. I deliberately reduced my contact with him. I'd answer his calls with short, dismissive replies and wait a long time before texting back a word or two. He seemed to sense something was wrong. He started calling more frequently, a subtle anxiety creeping into his voice. Bro, have you been busy lately? Yeah. Can I come home this weekend? Sure, but I might have to work late. Silence on the other end of the line. Then his voice came back, low and deep. Bro, is something wrong? No, I denied it instantly, my voice flat. Just focus on school. Don't overthink things. Then I quickly ended the call, like a shameful deserter. The night before I was set to leave, he came home after all. I was staring at that old phone full of memories when I heard the lock turn. I scrambled to shove the metal box under my bed, my heart pounding in my chest. He walked in, bringing the chill of the night air with him. He seemed even taller now, his presence almost overwhelming in the small living room. Why the sudden visit? I asked, trying to sound normal. He didn't turn on the light, just stood there in the darkness, looking at me. The moonlight outlined his sharp features. His eyes were startlingly bright but also terrifyingly dark. You're leaving? He asked. His voice was calm, but it held the oppressive weight of a gathering storm. My throat felt tight. I avoided his gaze. There's an overseas project for the company. I need to go supervise for a while. How long is a while? Maybe a year or two, I lied. I had no intention of coming back. He fell silent. The air was so thick it was hard to breathe. I could hear my own heart thudding in the quiet room. After a long moment, he let out a soft, low laugh, laced with an indescribable mix of mockery and coldness. Vincent, he said, using my full name for the first time. Is there anything you want to say to me? I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. Say what? That I've loved you for 2 lifetimes. So painfully and pathetically? That I can't stand to see you with anyone else. That I'm terrified history will repeat itself. That I'm terrified of losing you again? Couldn't. I lowered my eyes, my voice dry. You're grown up now. Take care of yourself. If you meet someone you like, give it a shot. The words felt like blades of ice tearing at my throat. I had said the most dishonest, most cruel thing I could. He lunged forward, closing the distance between us. His tall frame cast a shadow that completely enveloped me, radiating a powerful, aggressive energy. I instinctively backed away until my back hit the cold wall. There was nowhere left to run. He slammed a hand against the wall next to my head, trapping me within the bubble of his presence. His hot breath, laced with anger, fanned across my forehead. Someone I like? He repeated, each word squeezed out from between his teeth. Who would that be? What's the standard you've set for me? Huh? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I could only lower my eyes, avoiding his gaze that felt like it could burn me. My jaw clenched in silent evasion. After a long, heavy silence, he finally left. I fled to a foreign country like a coward on the run. A strange country, a strange language, strange people. I threw myself into my work, trying to numb my senses with exhaustion, leaving myself no energy to think about him. But it didn't work. Every sleepless night, every unguarded moment, his face would invade my mind. The wary, stubborn look in his eyes when he was 15. The focused profile as he did his homework under the lamp when he was 18. The slight lilt at the end of his voice when he called me bro. The red-rimmed eyes, filled with pain and accusation, the last time he looked at me. And in my past life, the coldness of his body as he died in my arms. Longing and guilt were two venomous snakes, coiling around me day and night, gnawing at my heart. I started drinking heavily. Only when the alcohol numbed my nerves could I find a moment of peace, a brief escape from the endless torment. I sat in the darkest corner of a bar, downing glass after glass of hard liquor until my vision blurred and the world spun. The bar was filled with loud music and unrestrained people, but I just felt cold, a chill that seeped deep into my bones. What was Johnny doing now? Had he graduated? Found a job? Was he already in love with someone else? Did he ever think of me? The thought of him smiling at someone else, of him holding someone else gently, felt like being sliced apart, piece by piece. The pain made me curl up in my seat. I downed another glass. The harsh liquid burned my throat but couldn't warm my frozen limbs. How pathetic, Vincent. You claimed to love him, died and lived again for him, but this time around, all you brought him was pain and confusion. You're a complete and utter failure. A coward hiding from reality in a bottle of booze. My consciousness started to fade. The lights around me twisted into bizarre, colorful shapes. I thought I was hallucinating. Why else would I see Johnny's face across the bar? The face I thought of day and night, the face that brought me so much pain. It looked more mature than I remembered, thinner, his jaw tight. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was staring right at me. I laughed foolishly and reached out, trying to touch the phantom. Johnny. My voice was slurred, heavy with alcohol. I miss you so much. I really, really miss you. The phantom didn't disappear. Instead, it shot out a hand and seized my wrist, the grip so strong it felt like it would shatter my bones. The touch was real and searing hot. I froze, my muddled brain unable to process the sudden reality. He yanked me off the bar stool and dragged me through the noisy, dancing crowd, then shoved me violently into the restroom. Bang! The stall door slammed shut and was locked. In the tiny space, the only sounds were our ragged breaths and the faint thumping of the music from outside. He pressed me against the door, his scorching body tight against mine, his hot breath on my face. Vincent, he said, his voice strained, each word seemingly ground out from his chest. Look at me. Who am I? I was forced to look up and met his bloodshot eyes. They were churning with so many emotions, hurt, anger, gut-wrenching pain, and a hint of a crazed desire I didn't dare to examine. The alcohol haze was shocked out of me. It wasn't a dream. It was really him. Johnny, you, my lips trembled. I couldn't form a complete sentence. The red in his eyes deepened. He leaned in, his nose almost touching mine, our breaths mingling, dangerous and intimate. His eyelashes lowered, making him look like an abandoned, heartbroken puppy. His voice was a low, pained rumble. Vincent, you told me to love someone else, but you never taught me how to stop loving you. You're a liar. You stole my heart and now you're trying to walk away. You can't be that cruel. He didn't give me any more time to think. He lowered his head and kissed me. His wet, hot kiss landed on my lips, his tongue tangling with mine, conquering my senses. My mind went completely blank. All my struggles and muffled protests were swallowed by him. He stole my breath, and the kiss made my legs go weak. I could only stay upright by clinging to the arm he had wrapped around my waist. The world spun around me. All that existed was his scorching breath, his burning body, and the bottomless darkness in his eyes that threatened to drag me down to hell with him. Alcohol and a delayed wave of fear made me tremble. But his kisses only grew deeper, more ferocious, as if he wanted to devour me whole and fuse me with his very bones. Just when I thought I would suffocate, he pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against mine as we both gasped for air. A sliver of saliva connected our lips. My lip was bitten and bleeding, and my mouth tasted of iron. He stared at my swollen lips, his eyes dangerously dark. He wiped away the blood at the corner of my mouth with his thumb. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion, on the verge of tears. You stole my heart, and now you want to throw me away. It's too late. Bro, I love you. Can you please not push me away, just look at me, please? I looked up and saw that Johnny was crying. Tears fell from his trembling eyelashes, soaking into the collar of my shirt. They were less like winter rain and more like silent, flowing lava on a deserted island, seeping through my skin and burning holes into my bones. I looked at his red-rimmed eyes, at the raw, almost self-destructive emotion he wasn't even trying to hide. In that moment, the walls I had built around my heart completely crumbled. He was right. It was too late. It was too late from the moment I came back and found him again. From the moment our lives became entangled in this messy, inescapable fate, everything was already set in stone. Couldn't run. And he would never let me go. A wave of immense exhaustion and despair washed over me, but with it came a strange, twisted sense of release, like I had nothing left to lose. Fine, let it be. If we're going to hell, then we'll go to hell together. I've been in love with him all along, haven't I? I lifted my head and kissed him back. It was a trembling, tear and blood-stained kiss, but it was an unmistakably clear answer. Johnny's body went rigid. Then, he responded with an even more ferocious, all-consuming passion. It was as if he had finally received the response he had been dreaming of, and all his emotions instantly transformed into an overwhelming desire and need. He lifted me up and set me on the bathroom counter. The cold ceramic sent a shiver through me. He pressed himself between my legs, our bodies fitting together even more tightly. In that cramped space, we kissed fiercely and silently, like it was our last celebration before the end of the world. Lost in the moment, reason had completely snapped. I woke up to a throbbing headache. My eyelids felt too heavy to open, and my whole body ached as if it had been taken apart and put back together. A particular, unmentionable area was distinctly sore. Fragments of last night's chaotic, wild memories rushed into my mind. The messy hotel sheets, his hot sweat dripping onto my chest, him whispering bro in my ear over and over in a hoarse voice, my cheeks flushed hot. I turned my head and met a pair of deep, dark eyes. Johnny was already awake. He was lying on his side, propped up on one hand, watching me without blinking. He was shirtless, revealing a smooth chest and defined abs, which were marked with several clear, scratch marks. "You're awake, bro," he said. His voice raspy from sleep and softened with affection. "Headache? Want some water?" He reached out and touched my forehead. "Good, no fever." He smiled, looking remarkably like a gentle, doting partner. The morning light bathed him in a golden glow, and for a moment, I was dazed. Johnny waved a hand in front of my face, a hint of hurt in his voice. "Who are you seeing through me this time, bro?" I sighed. He had clearly sensed something, but I couldn't possibly tell him about time travel. It was too absurd. His last life had been anything but easy, abandoned by family, betrayed by friends, and dead by 35. I didn't want him to experience any of that pain again. He had a new life now, and that was enough. Since I had decided to be with him, I couldn't keep seeing him as the Johnny from my past. So I came up with a lie. I took a deep breath and looked him in the eye, speaking seriously. "I once had someone I loved very much. You look a lot like him, but I've never thought of you as his replacement." That part was true. I had genuinely fallen in love with the Johnny of this world, and I would never be able to treat him as a substitute. Johnny looked at me with a complicated expression. His voice strained. "So where is he now?" I lowered my gaze. "He died. I can't forget him, but if you can accept that." A warm, solid embrace cut me off. Johnny pulled me into his arms, his voice muffled. "I'll be with you from now on." Outside, the sun was shining brightly, enveloping both of us in its light. And just like that, Johnny and I started dating. Once we made it official, Johnny's clingy side came out in full force. He would come home any chance he got under the pretext of keeping his bro company, but really he was just finding any excuse to be affectionate. When I cooked, he would come up from behind and wrap his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder, his breath warm on my neck. I'd have to nudge him away with my elbow. "You're in the way." He'd just grin, not at all annoyed, and try to steal a piece of ham I'd just sliced. When I hung up the laundry, he'd rush to help, then deliberately press his wet hands on my neck. He'd laugh triumphantly when I shot him a glare, his eyes crinkling. He whined about wanting to see a picture of my former lover, so I finally gave in and showed him the photo on the old phone. It was one of the few pictures we had together, taken at St. Victor's Harbor. Johnny stared at the picture and grumbled for a long time, his tone a little indignant. "We really do look alike, but I'm more handsome." Seeing him get jealous of himself and still try to make a comparison was so absurd that the heavy feeling in my heart strangely began to lift. I said, playing along, my voice flat. "He was more mature than you." His eyes widened in disbelief, like a puppy whose tail had been stepped on. He looked at me, utterly betrayed. "Bro." That one word was a drawn-out, dramatic accusation. Seeing him puff up his cheeks like an angry pufferfish, I felt a mix of amusement and exasperation. I knew he was just being playful. I walked over and gave him a quick kiss on the corner of his mouth. "All right, stop being jealous." As New Year's approached, Johnny started acting mysterious. One day, he insisted on taking me out, saying he had a surprise. As we drove, I slowly recognized the route. We were heading to St. Victor's Harbor. My fingertips grew a little cold, but I didn't say anything. "I saw that photo," he said, gripping the steering wheel and looking straight ahead. He tried to sound casual, but his tense jaw betrayed his nerves. "It was taken here, right?" "Yeah." "Let's take one too, bro," he said, glancing at me. His eyes were full of hope and a subtle plea. "A photo of us. A new beginning." I looked at the harbor getting closer, the salty sea breeze whipping through the car window. The cold images from my past life tried to resurface, but as I looked at the bright-eyed young man beside me, at the peaceful, bustling scene outside, the chill slowly receded. Maybe it really was time for a new beginning. "Okay," I heard myself say. His eyes lit up instantly. His smile widened, and he squeezed my hand tightly. The viewing platform was crowded and lively. He pulled me along, excitedly searching for the best spot. I went along with him, but my body was subconsciously tense, my eyes scanning the noisy crowd. The sea breeze felt bitingly cold. He noticed my stiffness and stopped. "Are you cold?" he asked, concerned. He started to take off his jacket. "No, it's fine," I said, stopping him. "It's just a little loud." He pulled me closer, using his body to shield me from the surrounding people. "It's about to start. I heard the fireworks are amazing this year." He looked up at the night sky, his profile clear in the dim light, full of anticipation. The countdown began. The crowd roared. 10, 9. My breath hitched. 8, 7. He squeezed my hand tighter. 6, 5. He turned and smiled at me. 4, 3, 2. The sharp whistle of a firework shooting into the sky. My body went rigid, my pupils contracting. On pure instinct, I braced my shoulder to shove him away and twist my body to shield him. But he reacted instantly. His arm tightened around me like an iron band, not only preventing me from pushing him but pulling me even more forcefully into his embrace, completely enveloping me. Boom! The first firework exploded in a dazzling burst of color, lighting up the night sky. The crowd erupted in a massive cheer. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a firework. I stood frozen in his arms, my mind blank for a second. The adrenaline rush made my heart pound wildly. He looked down at me, his eyes reflecting the brilliant lights, a little surprised and amused. "Bro, what's wrong? Did that startle you?" He thought I was just scared by the loud noise. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, bang! This time it wasn't a firework. Almost simultaneously, the arm holding me tightened violently. His body jolted, and a suppressed grunt escaped his throat. The smell of gunpowder and a faint scent of blood filled the air. The cheers of the crowd turned into screams and chaos. A gunshot. Someone's shooting. The sound of panicked footsteps and crying swept over us. But I couldn't seem to hear any of it. All I could feel was the weight of his body pressing against me and the warm liquid rapidly soaking through the shoulder of his shirt, smearing stickily onto my cheek and neck. It wasn't a hallucination. It was blood. But his arm around me didn't loosen at all, if anything. It held on tighter. "Johnny?" My voice was low, forced from between my teeth. I was afraid to move my hands, so I just gripped the back of his shirt. "Are you okay?" He looked down, his forehead beaded with cold sweat from the pain. His face was pale, but his eyes were unervingly clear, filled with a complex mix of something I couldn't describe. Shock, dawning realization, and a kind of final confirmation. He even managed a faint, twisted smile. "I'm fine." His voice was hoarse and his breathing unsteady. "It's just a graze, don't be scared." He was trying to comfort me, but his body swayed uncontrollably. The scene was quickly brought under control, and paramedics rushed in. Even as they were putting him on a stretcher, he refused to let go of my hand. "Bro," he said, looking at me, his gaze unreadable. His voice was weak from blood loss, but incredibly clear. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Johnny's left shoulder was wrapped in thick gauze. He was pale but seemed to be in good spirits. The bullet had grazed him, missing anything vital, but he had lost a lot of blood. I sat by his bed, peeling an apple for him. My hands were steady, but my mind was anything but calm. The terror of the past few hours and his earth-shattering words were still replaying in my head. He kept watching me, his expression gentle and filled with the relief of a survivor. So I said, cutting a slice of apple and holding it out to him, my voice even, "You really remember?" "Yeah," he said, taking a bite from my hand and chewing slowly. "Getting shot hurt like hell." And then, everything just came rushing back. He tried to sound casual, but the movement pulled at his wound, making him wince. "Serves you right," I said, handing him the rest of the apple. "For trying to be a hero." He took the apple with his good hand and smiled, his gaze turning distant. "I remember finding you, watching you grow up, how the way you looked at me changed after you turned 18. He paused, looking at me with a self-deprecating tone. "I also remember that I knew how you felt all along. I just always thought you were too young, that you'd meet someone better and shouldn't be tied down by me. All those girls I dated, it was partly to get you to give up." He sighed. "But watching you stay by my side year after year, watching you hide those feelings deeper and deeper, but never letting them fade, I knew I was probably done for, too." His voice was low, tinged with the gravity of his memories. "So when I asked you to go to St. Victor's Harbor that day, I was really planning, after the fireworks, to tell you to stop liking other people and just like me instead." I looked at him and said nothing. The corner of my heart that had been frozen for so long was finally being touched by sunlight, slowly and steadily melting. My eyes started to burn, but I just blinked, pushing the feeling down. "You're late," I said, my voice betraying no emotion. "I know," he admitted, his eyes full of apology and tenderness. "The confession I owe you took 2 lifetimes to deliver. You can decide how much interest I owe, bro." He reached out with his right hand and gently hooked my pinky finger with his, giving it a little shake. I wrapped my fingers around his, my grip firm but gentle. "You can spend this lifetime paying it back." Outside, the sun was shining, falling on our intertwined hands, warm and real.